Hi, I'm Katie Hacker and welcome to Bead's Baubles and Jewels. Today is all about embellishment, and 4mm beads are not always in the spotlight, but I'm going to show you how to use them to embellish rings. So what we're going to make is an earring, and you just take a plain silver ring and you can choose any size. This one is about 1.5 inches across. So I also cut my wire. This is pre-twisted wire, so it adds some decorative touch to it as well. And I've already loaded some 4mm beads onto the wire. And by choosing a variegated color strand, that really brings in some different variation and makes it more interesting to look at. And it takes some of the guesswork out of it for you too with matching colors. So leave a little bit of a tail at the end and just wrap that wire right around the ring. And you just want to use your fingers to press that over so that it's a tight coil around the outside edge of the ring. And one tip I would say too, when you're working with wire in a situation like this, is always work closest to the surface. So instead of taking the wire end and poking it through the ring and pulling it through like you would with thread, with wire you want to be aware that you're work hardening the wire every time you bend it. So keep your work really close to whatever it is that you're wrapping. So there's your first bead. And then you're just going to coil it around, slide your bead down, coil it around, and see how I'm pressing the wire through the ring instead of taking the wire end all the way through. That way there's less work hardening to this part so that it stays nice and supple for when you get around to the other side of the ring. It's not too brittle. So I just do a couple of coils here. Then we're going to slide the other bead into place and coil again. You can do between 2 and 3 coils, and this is 24 gauge wire. You can use any size wire. You just want to choose one that passes easily through the holes in the beads that you're using. And typically 4mm beads, especially ones that are made out of stone like these, have pretty small holes. You could use a bead reamer if you wanted to. That's a cylindrical type of file that fits down into the bead to enlarge that bead hole. So there you go. You start attaching beads and you just work your way all the way around the ring. And then when you get to the end, you have a tail that's a few inches long, and this one you're just going to fasten into place by coiling it a couple of times here too. And you can see that the beads are pretty evenly spaced just naturally by the number of coils that you make in between. So here you see you have a long tail and a short tail. So now what you're going to do is take your chain nose pliers and make a little 90-degree bend to get the wires close to each other. So you want to get those stems to get pretty close, and what you'll do now is hold them together so they're parallel, wrap the short wire around, and then just trim this extra away. And that creates your connection. Now what you can do is add another bead. And in this case I chose a 10mm bead because I really like these red stones with the red and orange. It just looks so pretty together. So at this point, you'll just make a bend, take your round nose pliers, and make a loop. And this is a wrapped loop because this wire is pretty flexible still. It wouldn't hold tight if it was just a basic loop. So you want to go ahead and wrap it. So I always just hold the loop between the tips of my chain nose pliers and use my hands. Some people prefer to use a second pair of pliers, and that's fine too. So you've got your coil. Then you trim away the extra, turning the flush cutter always to the work, and then slide this on to your ear wire. And I like to use these ear wires because you can also embellish the ear wire itself. So to fasten this in place, you're going to use your pliers to just squeeze this together right here. And you might need to bend this down a little bit to get it back into position. Then what you can do is trim another piece of wire to embellish the front of the ear wire. You could also add a bead there if you wanted to. That would be cute. So then wrap this around, and again, you're just coiling this into place to create a little additional embellishment on the earring. And I always cut a wire that's longer than what I need so that I can just trim away the extra. That's easier than trying to make a really tight coil and getting it positioned into place. You could also use colorful wire that matches the beads you're using, or you could use a thicker or thinner gauge of wire. Like I mentioned, you could also add a bead there. That looks fun. So then you slide this into place, and you want to make sure that all of these little edges are flush. You can squish them down with your chain nose pliers and turn that to the back, and then you can put your ear wire on here, and have your perfect little earring that's embellished with those 4mm accent beads that are so fun to use. Now take a look at the finished earring. And so this is your basic earring here with one row of beads. But let me show you what would happen if you add another row of beads. So what you would do in that case is take your wire, cut an extra wire, and then add some 6mm beads. And you want to cut a wire that is, I would say, about 18 inches. So this is a little bit shorter than what I would need to make it all the way around the earring. But you can make it work. So I'm just going to slip this off of here. And then basically what you can do is you can either go with the same pattern that you created before and just wrap over the top, or you can go in the opposite direction. That can be fun too. And then you have kind of a crisscross effect. So like I said, here you're finished. You have your really quick, nice and easy earring. Or you can, if you have a little extra time, you can layer this over the top like this, and you would just position each bead in between. So that's using your 6mm beads with the 4. So you have all different sizes of rounds, and that adds a really fun layered effect too. So take a look at this pendant, because this is another example. This is using 6mm beads on the ring and then 8mm bead at the top. And all I did was the same technique for that, but then attached it to a leather cord, and it makes a really fun necklace. You could also hang something in the center. You could attach a tassel to the bottom. You can add charms, which would be a really fun accent. If you take a look at the white and turquoise earrings, that's a way that you can combine the 4mm and the 6mm rounds in a really sweet and simple little earring. Depending on the size of the beads and the size of the ring, you can change your whole look.